So welcome to this panel hosted by Circus Talk titled What's Up with Canadian Circus? It's part of an ongoing series by Circus Talk. It's called Circus and Changing Realities 2020. I'm your moderator, Kim Campbell. And before I introduce you to our panelists, I want to say that they're all located in Montreal, Canada. And we're going to start by introducing Ruth Wickler. She is the Deputy Director of Programming at Circus Arts at TOHU, which is Montreal's premier 360-degree circus presenter venue. And she's also the host of the annual MCC, or Montreal Complètement Cirque, festival, as well as the International Market of Circus, which happens every July in Montreal. We also have Dr. Louis Patrick Leroux, who is founding director of the Montreal Working Group on Circus. He is professor at Concordia University and associate researcher and teacher at the National Circus School of Montreal. He also is the co-editor of Cirque Global, Quebec's Expanding Circus Boundaries, a book about Quebecois circus. We have Eric Langlois, executive director of Ecole nationale de Cirque, one of the two professional circus schools in Canada. And Eric, I think you've been there in your role since about 2016, if I'm correct. And then we have Nathalie Delorme, Executive Director of Communications at En Piste, Canada's National Circus Arts Alliance. And that's our group today. So we're going to delve into all things Canadian circus. As many of you might know, Quebec in particular plays a really important role in circus around the world. It's the home to some big circus institutions, En Piste, which we've already introduced, the National Circus School that Eric is the head of, TOHU, which Ruth is the head of. And there's also some very large, well-known circus companies located there. Seven Fingers, Cirque du Soleil, Cirque Éloize, just to name a few. They all call Quebec home. Many in the circus world, and like many in the circus world, I make a trek down there every July to go to the Montreal Complètement Cirque Festival and the market, the international market, which is called the MIC, where hundreds of people from the circus industry come every year to find out about the circus shows, to see what's trending, and to get some professional development skills. At the same time, for about 4 or 5 years, if I'm correct, Patrick, you have had, through Concordia University, you've run an academic program along with the Montreal Working Group to invite academics from around the world to interact with the programs and to augment their own work. Is that right, about 5 years?
Yeah, this would have been the 4th year had it not been for COVID. And the theme this year was circus and invention. So we had engineers, we had designers, artists. It would have been amazing. But yeah, come back next year.
I can't wait. Well, but as you know, for the past 6 months, like the rest of the world, Montreal Circus has taken a big hit, starting with the temporary closure of the Circus City, where TOHU, Cirque du Soleil, and ENC are all located, each for their own reasons. TOHU and ENC, for safety reasons, couldn't have shows and classes for a while. Cirque du Soleil for financial reasons, following the need to shut down a lot of their worldwide tours. And now the pandemic isn't quite over, but some worldwide circus organizations are starting to tentatively adjust their programming and reopen. So we want to check in with you, experts, and see what Canadian circus is doing, how you're responding to these tentative attempts to restart circus in Canada. Before we go there, I'd like to ask Patrick if you can do a land acknowledgement for Montreal.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Kim. So Montreal is known as in the Mohawk language as Teotika, or broken in two, because of the way the river breaks around the island. It is the unceded indigenous lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. The Anishinabeg, Abenaki, Huron-Wendat, and Métis have served as custodians for this land over time, together with all First Peoples of Turtle Island, as it is called originally. We extend our deepest respect to the elders of these communities and to all Indigenous people who carry the history of this land, caring for it and calling it home. I'd also like to add that Montreal is also the modern metropolis of the Quebec or Quebecois nation.
Thank you for that, Patrick. Maybe we'll start with you. So just to get an idea of how Canada feels about circus in general, what percentage of the government arts spending in Quebec and Canada normally goes to support circus? And has there been a big adjustment for that during the pandemic?
Right. So percentage-wise, it's a bit complicated because there's just so many programs. But if we were to maybe give a sense of scale, perhaps, the Canada Council for the Arts at the federal level, which is similar to the National Endowment for the Arts in the US, if you want to compare, basically commits $203 million for arts funding a year across Canada. So this is for a population of about 30 million. Of that, 1.4 million goes to circus specifically, so it's relatively small. But one has to say that circus has been funded for the longest time, except most recently through interdisciplinary programs. So it's just of late that circus has had more of an official recognition nationally. If you want to compare, so the 1.4 million for circus, well, if you compare with theater, which has 40 million a year, or dance, which has 25 million a year. But circus is mostly focused in Montreal. There are obviously companies across the country, but the essential activity is concentrated mostly in Quebec and Montreal, more specifically, save for a few companies outside, specifically in Quebec City. Provincially, the CALQ, the Conseil des Arts et des Lettres du Québec, which is the provincial equivalent, so a state equivalent to the national funding, has been, since 2001, has recognized circus as an official art form. That is to say, it's a fundable art form, so a legitimate art form. The same as opera, the same as dance, the same as theater and music, etc. I've been having trouble finding some of those numbers because of the multiple streams and funding pockets, if you will. But what I can say is that it's largely more generous than the federal government. And the latest input has been 10 million new dollars Canadian to help with the circus milieu, so the circus environment through the pandemic. So this is in addition to the existing programs. I would add to that many other streams of funding, some of them commercial, some of them artistic. For instance, the Caisse de dépôt, so our retirement fund, our collective retirement fund, invested into Cirque du Soleil, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But they essentially bought 20% of this $2.5 billion company at one point to make sure it stayed in Quebec. And the provincial government offered $200 million to ensure, with all sorts of conditions, through investment in Quebec, that Cirque du Soleil would stay. So you see, like, basically, if I were to summarize, very strong moral commitment to keeping circus active, thriving, lively, and especially keeping it anchored in Quebec society and in Canadian society to a lesser extent. But there's still that willingness from our governments and from our society basically to support circus, contemporary circus.
Wow. Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah.
I could have gone on with more.
No. So I have one more question for you, Patrick, and I don't know how relevant it is given that information that you just shared with me, because what I've noticed is around the world as we speak to other people and from countries about circus, there's this cry that we need to think about the infrastructure a little bit more, because things are kind of crumbling because of the funding and the sources and things. So a lot of people are saying that the industry kind of needs to rethink a little bit the infrastructure because the pandemic has disrupted it so much. And I wonder if there's that same feeling in Canada, and if so, what changes would help the artists and small companies the most, and what role would your government play in making those changes, if any?
What do you mean by infrastructure? I guess that would be my question. So
Well,
where you want to go with this.
First and foremost, like the funding, the presenters, venues,
Right.
just the whole system. Like, is the whole system going to sustain itself through a long period of not being able to produce profitable work?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, we're in an interesting situation where you have this one huge company, obviously, Cirque du Soleil, which is in its own economic reality, its own economic realm. That said, it's an essential player in the ecosystem, both economically, socially, and culturally, artistically, in the Quebec environment. But at the same time, you've got smaller companies like Sept Doigts de la Main, Seven Fingers, and Cirque Éloize, which are, compared to other companies around the world, extremely large, well organized companies with quite a few employees as well, and interesting infrastructures, physical and touring related. Those companies perhaps don't rely as much on the commercial success. Obviously they do, but not as much as on the commercial success as Cirque du Soleil would. Cirque du Soleil with their 44 shows, with their boat shows, with their permanent shows in Vegas and in Orlando, with their proliferation of opportunities for constant growth and an obligation for constant growth also that comes with their financial structure, isn't the same as some of our middle to large size companies, and it's millions of miles far removed from the smaller companies, from the collectives, from artists starting up. And what's great about the Calc, thunderstorm you can probably hear. What's great about the Calc commitment is that a large part of that funding was actually earmarked for the relève, the young up-and-coming artists. So I'm sensing that real shift from what had been basically a model with the biggest player in the world, basically fueling a lot of creative activity. Once that player isn't as solid, isn't as omnipresent, well, it leaves a lot of space for everyone else basically to find their own place. It's terrible financially. It's it's extremely difficult for the circus environment and the cultural environment generally. But if you want to turn a positive spin on it, it's going to leave a lot of space for so many incredibly talented individuals who basically have incredible know-how, international level know-how, who will now want to start new projects, join other companies. So there'll be a fundamental shift, I think, over the next few months in rethinking how we entertain this relationship with previously existing structures.
Thank you, Patrick. It's good to take a look at the bigger picture like that and to see that some of the infrastructural changes are probably going to happen organically, as you say, just through the process of the shifts in power that are going to happen. Natalie, if we can ask you a question, what initiatives has En Piste put into place to help unemployed artists? And do circus administrators and other people in the industry like riggers, et cetera, also benefit from those programs?
Yeah, well, as a professional alliance, we were constantly thinking about how to better support the industry and how we can create some new programs and new initiatives. But I have to say that with this pandemic, we've drastically increased the number of programs that we had available, and also we widened the access across Canada for a lot of our programs. From the very start of the crisis, what we've put in place as Pan-Canadian initiatives is a lot of free online training sessions for artists, which later developed into paid training programs for artists and riggers as well, that we've done in partnership with a college that train technicians in performing arts. So they can now train during quite a few weeks. I think it's 14 weeks or something like that, while being paid. We also had regular networking sessions for the community. One thing that we realized is that we had a lot of people that have come back home and suddenly found themselves without any activities. So they needed to feel the feel of being in their community. So we organized a lot of networking sessions for them, conversations with experts also, including psychologists, health and safety managers, so they know how to prepare for the reopening of studios, for example. We've done also, we've gone from, 2 monthly newsletters to daily newsletters because there was so much information to communicate to the sector, making sure that everybody knew, and there was so much coming from so many different sources as well. So just to have one newsletter that summarized everything that were changing or new measures that were available, I think that was very appreciated by the community. We also straight away put on a survey to measure the impact of COVID-19, because everybody was panicking, but what concretely were the economic impact of such a pandemic, of a stop of all activities. And then we had just published an economic studies, which we reviewed with those new numbers and published again. And these numbers also helped us with all the advocacy that we've done to governments, Quebec government, obviously, and we're still working, we're still negotiating with the Canadian government. But through the Quebec government, we did give, in addition to all the regular fundings that Patrick mentioned earlier, we gained an extra $10 million to help the sector recover from the crisis. This is put through a lot of grants for artists and programs for organizations as well, for companies. So this is to support them, and also this was some projects that were already in progress, but we've received confirmation recently for 2 new projects that will help the sector as well to recover, which is a support program for artists, performers, and trainers to protect them while they're training, because at the moment they have protection if they hurt themselves while at work, but not while they train. So this will be put in place in the next few months, as well as the local circus arts, a program that support local circus arts circulation in Quebec, in order to strengthen the local network, because obviously a lot of we say that we estimate that 90% of company revenues come from abroad. So with the pandemic, we already knew that, but I think with the pandemic it really showed that we need to reinforce the structure locally as well, to build on that. So these are the main initiatives that we've put in place to respond to all the different categories of professionals that we represent, but also organizations.
That's a lot.
A lot of work.
You love it? Good. There's a lot to do.
Yeah.
I have another question for you, but I just wanted to comment on one thing you mentioned about your survey. I remember there's a statistic going around from that survey that was a little bit alarming that keeps being repeated. I think it's 66 or 67% of circus artists were considering a career change after the pandemic started. Maybe I'm wrong on the number, and that was with Canadian artists, right? That are very well supported based on what you're telling me with the government. So that is telling, if people who have all this, it might have been asked before the support money came through, perhaps, I don't know. Patrick, did you want to say something about that?
I just want to add that En Piste has emerged as an incredible, strong force during the pandemic. They've shown leadership, like I haven't seen in a decade, basically. They were the organization that circus artists turn to, and I've only heard good things. So I'd like to commend Nathalie and everyone at En Piste for that work. It's been absolutely essential for everyone.
Thank you. I'll pass on the feedback to the team.
So, yeah, go ahead. Did you want to comment?
I was just going to say that I think it made us realize as a team at En Piste, but also I think it made the community realize how important a professional association like En Piste is for a sector, because normally on a day-to-day basis it's just an association that is there, but in a moment of crisis like this, I think you realize how much it has your back, and it really is here for you.
True.
So yeah, but yes, regarding your the career transition, obviously this was done in April, so I think the support was just the response benefit from Canada was only just starting, and it was still, I think people were still in a sort of emotional wave of what are we going to do next, but we have been working, I haven't mentioned that, but we have been working together with the Center of Resources and a career transition for dancers here in Quebec that are now including a lot of other performing arts disciplines in their mandate, and we are offering support through workshops with them and conversations with them, and yeah, so some people who are seriously still thinking about a career change can have support through them as well.
I wanted to ask you, are there any issues that in the circus community in Canada that came to the forefront since the pandemic started that surprised you?
When the first one I mentioned was how important our role was going to be is for the sector, and I think yes, we've taken that very seriously. I think that was the first thing that sort of hit us in the face. Oh my God, we need to do something, because I think we hadn't realized to what extent how vulnerable the sector was. We've always seen the circus arts, especially in Quebec, as a strong and growing industry. Although we had just done an economic survey that highlighted some of the weaknesses, which were the fact that a lot of the 90% of the revenue were coming from abroad. So that there was a lot of diversity of income in the industry, and also the lack of public funding compared to other disciplines. But I mean that really was the first thing that suddenly, if everything stops, you know, like how vulnerable the sector can be and how much support it needs. Eric is raising his hand. Maybe do you want to?
I think there was in every crisis there's opportunities. And En Piste was there, and others were there also, taking the opportunity to advocate for the sector. And En Piste did a tremendous work especially with the Conseil des Arts et des Lettres du Québec, so the Quebec Arts Council, and did also the work with the Canadian Council. So they came up with response, with financial response, with changes in their program. So Louis Patrick just mentioned how much impactful have been En Piste for the last weeks, last months, not only for the artists, of course for the artists, but also for the company and for the whole sector. We've been involved with a group of 35 or so training artistic training institution all over Canada, which are clients at Heritage Canada, so the Federal Ministry of Culture, and we also advocate there for a support, an appropriate answer to the pandemic. But we were there before the pandemic, advocating for the whole sector. So it's just like if all together at a specific moment in the history, we were together advocating to those institutions, and I think it really raised the awareness of the public funders and public authorities about the importance of the sector. And of course, the focus was on Cirque du Soleil. Everyone were concerned and aware that we should come up with an appropriate answer and response to that. But it opened up to the old sector and the reality of the old sector. And En Piste was very, very successful there, saying, okay, there's the Cirque du Soleil issues and context, but there's also all the other companies, all the artists' reality, and that you should be aware of, and you should come up with. And there was an opening in a year to listen to those requests, and I think we've been collectively very, very successful. So there's really a change, I think. And I think it's a structural strength, a change that will stay, in a systemic change.
I sure hope so. Yeah, I hope so. Ruth?
I think what Eric is, everyone's pointing to is that there's a complex ecosystem here that supports circus, and it comes from artists having ideas and wanting to develop them. It comes from needing to train. It comes from theaters like ours who want to present companies and connect them to the public. It's a complex ecosystem, and there's also the role of government in Quebec is so different from that in the US, I can say, in terms of there's a real accountability in the sense of, you know, you pay your taxes and then you get back services that are very clear. And so the dialogue is something like, it's much more of a kind of like open ear exchange between our government and then, you know, our needs and that kind of dialogue. And I think certainly in the moment of crisis, that's what's been beautiful to watch and participate in actually is, you know, different associations of like-minded institutions kind of coming together in networks and to have collective voices, government officials listening, opening their doors, wanting to know what do you need, how are things changing, staying attuned. The exchange has been productive and impressive, and there's also they're happening at a provincial level and also at a national level.
And I also see that, thank you, Ruth. I also see En Piste you responding in real time to like situations that are arising. Like you said, you went from like twice a month to everyday newsletter because so many resources are popping up and so much importance of sharing information. You've been responding to the social unrest through Black Lives Matter and through victims' voices. You know, things like this really are present and I think exacerbated by the pandemic and by unemployment. And your response has been super essential to that. Is that something that you had to grapple with, or is it's just a day-to-day tuning in on that?
Well, these are issues that we were already, how do you say, we were already aware of, and we were already planning to, well, we had a lot of training tools have come out and resources have come out recently. Well, I think it was a year ago, was it? Maybe someone else can correct me about harassment in the workplace in Quebec, done by a company. They were mandated by the government, I think, INIS to produce those resources. Obviously, we circulated those, we promoted those, and we were planning to do a whole forum on diversity in April before the pandemic. So these were already on our radar, but I have to say that yes, in these times of unrest, like you say, these key issues have come out. And we like other issues that come out, we just try to get the resources out as quickly as possible for the community so that they can have access to information and tools. Yeah.
So those women are too honest. I would say it's a woman effect, like the countries that were very successful in their fight against the pandemic that were led by women. En Piste is led by a bunch of wonderful women, and I think it's the woman effect.
Perhaps, yes.
Thank you, Eric.
Eric, I'd like to ask you a question now. So you're preparing for your school year to start back up. I'm sure you have a full class. How different will the year look for the students and teachers this year?
Oh God.
Open-ended question.
Well, online classes. Well, it'll be we'll be delivering the material and the work and the activities in a hybrid format. So most of the theoretical classes and contents will be given through online format and platform. Mostly, though, we will try to keep some rendezvous in presence with their teachers. But where is the most impactful? It's on the practical classes, where we for security reason, we have to reduce the amount of students and participants in each groups, reduce their presence in the studios to allow distancing. And so we're starting the next school year on August 31st, and on a mode where we will, the way we usually plan and the schedule, the daily schedule is completely redesigned. We'll work with cohorts or with school years. So all the high school students will be together in the studio, all the first year, the second year, and the third year at the professional program will be together. So we'll start from early in the morning and late in the evening. So they won't be together again anymore, certainly for the next 6 months, I would say. So it's a big change, whereas, the sense of community and its exchange is part of the experience at the National Circus School. So that's what will happen. Hopefully, if the rules changes, we'll try to go back to something which was the normality in the past. But we'll see. We'll have to be we have to act very safely. And I'm impatient, and sometimes I say to my safety team, you're too secure, and I have to talk to myself and say, no, you can't be secure. So act like those women, be secure, start that way, and then you'll be able to revise, but keep it. We don't want to go back in quarantine. I was for a few weeks very scared about seeing those young people coming back to school and having the same behavior they have in the society. They don't, I think, for what I know, and I have a daughter of that age, they're not acting very safely these days when they're outside together, meeting, partying. And I was very much afraid, but I already had discussion with colleagues in other schools that have already started their program, and they say the students are perfect. They're very respectful of the rules, and I think the threatening of going back in quarantine is so strong that I think we can expect that behavior from them.
Yeah, there's a lot on the line for them right now. They probably have that in mind too. Ruth, did you want to respond?
I just want to give a little context of where we're at virus-wise right now in Montreal. So basically, Montreal or Quebec was the epicenter of the virus right at the beginning, but then they really did flatten the curve. So their curve looks a lot like New York City.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So we're basically really low right now. And yesterday, I think there were 55 cases for all of Quebec, which is 8 million people.
And I would add, school is starting in 2 weeks, so that's going to affect, obviously, that curve. But at this point, we're allowed 250 people in any given location, closed location, as long as everyone wears a mask and is separated by 1.5 meters if you're sitting down, or 2 meters if you're standing up. So this
for spectators.
For spectators,
sitting quietly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Whereas in studios and in training contexts, it may be more like 4 meters distance.
Yeah, Eric, I read your this document that you this risk and distancing assessment document that you put out and through En Piste. It looks like a useful model for circus schools to figure out how to continue training during COVID-19 and to keep those distances. And there's 5 levels of risk for activities, which is crazy for circus artists who are used to probably thousands of levels of risk, but this is a different kind of risk. It outlines some requirements for staff, like for example, that for spotting, like staff will be wearing PPE, and that like if people are going to do hand-to-hand together, they have to live in the same household and certain restrictions like that. What is that like? How does your staff and your student body react to that? Are they on board with that for the time being, or?
Can't say right now.
You're aware of it, though.
Yeah, we're aware of it, and I think we'll really have to wait until they're really in, and they're with us. Of course, they understand that, and they'll have a training, specific training at their first day in the school. It's a very complex one. We have made one for the school, so it's much more detailed. It's 100 pages, I think. It's crazy. But most of what we have done, we have worked with them, in connection with them, and so they're with us with that. But of course, we'll have to experience it a little bit more. This example of the duos being obliged to work to live together is not the rule anymore. They're allowed to work together, but they have to wear a mask. So yeah, it'll be in the practice, in the doing, that will tweak that. But certainly we have consult other milieu for this in sports, for example, what they're doing, what they had already experienced at the moment we were writing ours, and we'll have to also rewrite our own protocol, inside protocol, and so it's a continuous process.
Wow. Well, thank you, Eric. Ruth, if I could switch to you for a question. So how is TOHU just did the Montreal Complete Mont Cirque online festival, or what was it called? Not Complete Mont Cirque, it was called Jusque, I don't remember.
Almost
Cirque, yeah, almost Cirque. How is TOHU morphing its role now in local and international community in order to survive and assist international circus? Because that's been a big role for TOHU, and I know that it's important that you're involved still. Have you implemented any new programs, for example?
So I'll say that when the pandemic happened, the kind of first initial things that we were able to do was to, we obviously, after we canceled everything, was to start kind of building up things that we could do proactively quite right away. And one of those was to move the MIC into the MIC Circus Market into the virtual space, and to take advantage of the opportunity to do some things we had wanted to do for a long time. So one of those is to enable the MIC to be a network with ongoing programming and ongoing relationship development opportunities, and not just only a one event for 4 days. So that's what we were able to put together and put in place, and then run in July in partnership with Circus Talk. And then now we've launched 14 working groups based on different areas of concern in the circus field. And those are all in the process of having their first, second, and third Zoom meetings. Almost all of them are deciding to meet monthly and get things done. So that's going to be, I hope, something that endures in an ongoing way and has an impact on the sector. They're international groups, and there's no, it's all virtual. So there's no reason why anyone from any country shouldn't participate, except for the time zone of the Zoom meeting. We also decided we reformulated our approach to have kind of 3 priorities at TOHU. One would be vis-a-vis circus. So one would be to support artists. The second one is to support artists connecting to audiences. And the third is to deepen the connection between circus as an art form and the community at large, whether you're an audience for a specific show or not. So in the supporting artists category, we basically have occupied many, because historically we've had a very close relationship with the National Circus School, but because of their shifting, because of the circumstances, we're now hosting artists to do training in our facilities and outdoors. So we're basically taking over anywhere that's not in use. We're offering it for artists to come and train with us. That's with Calc support. And we're doing that in coordination with the Seven Fingers and Cirque Éloize, who are also opening their venues. And then Monastère is also opening their venue for training. So there's lots of new opportunities for artists to come and show up and train right now in this moment. And another way that we're supporting artists is to offer them residency space. So we've always done that, also in coordination with the school. But we're reformulating our approach to offering residencies so that we're taking over more spaces. We've also pitched a bunch of tents outside of our building. So the grounds now have more kind of space options that you could develop a work within in one of these little smaller to medium-sized tents. Yeah, so helping artists to develop new creations, whether it ends up being shown to the public or not, is another way of supporting artists and keeping them active. And then we're developing plans for presenting works. And obviously, basically in our conversations with artists, it's become clear that, you know, nothing that anyone had in their repertoire before is basically ready to go right now for a whole list of reasons. And so basically for us to be able to present any work, it's going to involve a deep collaboration with artists to support them either adapting a piece or creating something new with new, new configurations. And so we're on board with a number of companies helping them along that road as well. So basically the funding model, obviously with I think all presenters in the world, part of the reasons why we're all kind of like, having a hard time right now is that the business model that relied on ticket sales doesn't really work right now. And so you're going to see across the field of presenting, those who have governments that are willing to cushion the fact that we have to have reduced ticket numbers are going to survive better than those that don't have governments who are willing to help. Because basically, anyway, so that we're working closely with our government funders to kind of work out a formula that can enable us to do projects that are either have unique audience configurations, whether it's in small pods or moving around or outdoors or that kind of thing, and then eventually to do presenting, but to do it for much smaller audiences that are further spread out.
Eric was talking about sort of inversing the roles and seeing an incredible opportunity in this crisis, and it seems like you're taking advantage of what's good about this. It's a very dynamic approach. The tents will be great for the summer and fall, but obviously we have winter here. But even in terms of your relationship to the artists, to the companies, you'll have more of a hands-on relationship perhaps than TOHU had in the past. I'm seeing a lot of good potentially come out of this in terms of the relationship between the artists and the producers.
Well, I think a lot of what's been disrupted is hierarchies, the old hierarchies, and also all of us, whether it's our market function, whether it's our presenting function, we've had to, really make a case for what the heck we're here for. We absorb a lot of resources, and it's really important for us to. And at first, I would say I personally was, wondering what is our role going to be. Now I've seen in our field, among my colleagues in our field, that that presenters have a really important role. We continue. It's not necessarily a role of like gatekeeper that's the most important, but it's the role of structuring that connection with audiences. And also, so basically we're looking at audiences and ensuring that audiences stay connected to this art form, even when the art form has to adapt and morph into something that can connect, can be present and connecting with them. And that's a really important function. And then the important function is with the market is, Canada, again, a little snapshot of where we're at, is also that Canada has the closed borders. And so we're not letting anyone in. So we can't make an engagement. We can't make a firm commitment to invite a foreign company at this time because they couldn't get in here. And once they got in, if they were to get in, they'd have to be here for 14 days before they could even perform. And so anyway, these are restrictions we're dealing with. And so part of what the market is doing is trying to keep those connections alive and keep those relationships alive and productive through dialogue, just like you're doing with Circus Talk. But you know, these connections between artists and presenters and all these relationships across the sector are so complex. They have to be kept alive and nurtured right now, and the virtual space is obviously the right.
I like that you said that you know, you had to sort of like rethink your position and your role a little bit. That's really shows the adaptability of your organizations. And I think, you know, like you said, keeping those relationships with the international people, but also fostering with the people that are here now, these residencies and things, and expanding your role to accommodate them is really important. And probably in the long term will do more for the growth of Canadian circus than you think. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. To foster those roles.
Well, one thing I've noticed is that, for example, the artists are, one thing that the funding bodies have done is they've created grant opportunities directly for artists to create and research work. So there's a city of Montreal has put together almost $1 million and said, hey, artists, find a spot in the city that doesn't that's in public space but doesn't require you to get a permit. Mm-hmm. Invent a performance project and pitch it to us, and we'll give you up to $15,000. Mm-hmm. I mean, just, you know, I'm American, that's like, woo, just a total dream. You know? But anyway, so these are the kind of things where the funders are going straight to the artists, right? And so then, you know, for us as a presenter, it's important for us to be able to be like, well, how do we, you know, what's our role in there? Do we accompany artists? Do we play, you know, do we provide a permitless spot for them to do this? Then if they do, how do we use our amazing, you know, one thing we have is marketing capacity. So can we mobilize our marketing capacity to support emerging artists that are doing smaller projects rather than only the larger scale work that we were doing in the past? So these are the kind of, you know, we're watching this dance of the funders connected with the artists and how our role, and I mean, I cannot tell you how many letters of support that I have written, you know, saying, you know, to go with to support the artists and help them to make the case to funders. Anyway, it's a complex ecosystem, but we're very much, you know, very.
I think what we're hearing here is very, very interesting. Is for those who've been successful through the crisis, are those that were communicating and that were reacting to the environment changes. Mm-hmm. And for example, I mean, one of the big issue is because we're not allowed for security reason to provide as much contact hours and practical classes, then, you know, it's raising the anxiety to the teachers and to the students that, oh my God, not as much time pass on technique than we should and we could and they should provide to us. What will happen? And then they start being scary. And then from a manager's perspective, how can we do to provide the same amount? It's not possible. And then I had a discussion with a colleague from another school, and he said, you know what? I mean, creation here is at play, should be at play, because you cannot pass as much time in learning technique. Maybe you can reinvent yourself from a creative perspective, and then your answer to the pandemic and your answer when you leave the school at the end of your training, then you have a new proposition to offer. And that's what Ruth was talking more or less, is coming up with new answers, new response to the environment. So whereas I was very torn, oh, let's just look at it from another angle, and where is our expertise, where is our know-how? Our know-how is also in training them as creators. Then we'll put some emphasis on it and not just try to use the amount available in studios just for technique, but also for creation.
That's so interesting, Eric, because really what you're saying, and it totally jibes with Ruth's thing, but it's like ultimately circus, the signature Canadian circus style will probably change a little bit as a result of that. If you're focusing more on creation and not as hard on technique, even for a year, it's probably going to create a new type of something different, something we haven't seen, and that's really interesting. Ruth?
Well, I think that, you know, the Cirque du Soleil taking a little break, you know, well, what do we have after that? We have an art form that is just, you know, that has a lot of growth and it has a lot of brilliant creative artists who have a toolbox of amazingly creative, you know, unusual tools. Mm-hmm. And so there's so much for circus to do here to grow into an art form alongside the other art forms. Mm-hmm. You know, so basically it hasn't, because I think because the commercial side of things has loomed so large, and that was linked to demand. Mm-hmm. And just like with the airplanes, you know, there's like low demand right now, and that's why it's working. There's room for circus to develop here as a nonprofit art form, the way that, you know, so that it does, you know, so that is it unfortunately will need more support from government like other art forms, but then also it, you know, it has the talent, the know-how, the creativity, the potential is here. It's among us here. Mm-hmm. So we have this, we have a lot of, you know, and people are here, they're here. The other thing that, the other influence I've seen with companies making things is that, you know, because everyone isn't leaving every 10 minutes to go off on some commercial contract, companies might have a prayer of staying stable and developing work together, you know, over a long period of time. And that is also crucial to developing new languages and new artistic ways of doing things that are signature to a smaller company.
Maybe one thing, Quebec Circus has been atomized, like sort of pushing outward, touring internationally for so long. Mm-hmm. This has forced us to sort of regroup and rethink, what are we about? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? And that's not a bad thing. You know, obviously financially it is, but I mean, in the long term, it's exacerbating certain trends that were already there, certain artistic approaches, more of a queer take, an alternative take on circus. This was happening already. Mm-hmm. But I think this crisis is basically allowing those other forms, those smaller forms to thrive to a certain extent.
I agree. I was going at the same place as Ruth was saying. I mean, when she was thinking about Cirque du Soleil, I was exactly somehow some kind of vacuum, and then that leaves spaces for new creation. And yeah, and I think again, I may be naive or candid in here, but I think there's a real opportunity, and I think something is happening. Plus, it's generational, I would say. You know, we can feel it from the school that the students, more students than in the past, are interested in a collective work way of doing things, and so it's leaving a space, and I think all the institutions, you know, like venues, like public funders, and they say, okay, what space is available, and there's an opportunity there. So as a school, we have to support that. As a venue and the diffuser, you have to support that. So yeah, I think something very, very interesting is going on, is happening.
That's very heartening, and I think it'll be very interesting to see. It might be the generation of the small to mid-sized circus company rising a little bit into popularity. I do want to ask a little bit about how much Cirque du Soleil has influenced the circus economy in Quebec. Patrick, you probably know a lot about this.
Absolutely.
But also, how intertwined is it with the history of your institution specifically? I don't know if you each want to answer that, or if you have something to say, you can just add it. And also, to follow that up, how much is their success or failure going to make or break Quebec Circus or your institution? Is it intertwined at all anymore, or not necessarily? Go ahead, Ruth, you start.
Well, I just want to point out that 3 of the 4 panelists are, you know, originally located on the Cité des Arts du Cirque on Circus Art City. So we're all right there with Cirque du Soleil. So inevitably we're all linked You know, I think none the three of us were not there at the very beginning origin times, but you know, but that said, it seems to me like the conversation we were just having about supporting you know, independent creations within circus is something that we can do without you know, Cirque du Soleil maybe being as active. That said, of course, the question I would be interested in hearing from Eric about this, you know, because students go into a field with a job prospect. I guess, you know, people go to theater school without ever thinking they'll ever get paid, but I wonder about that.
We're laughing because it hurts.
That's exactly what I thought when I went to theater school. It doesn't matter.
Well, intertwined, I would say. Not well, of course. More than 150 graduates from the school passed by the Cirque and du Soleil, but it's much more than that. It's having the proximity with them. It's sharing coaches. It's sharing designers, creators. It's a research partner, very important research partner. It's a funder. It's a donator to the school, very important one through the years. More than, I think it's more than 2 million given to the school through the years. So the relationship is enormous, for sure. Them not being there anymore, it'll be impactful to the school, certainly, but it'll be impactful for the whole sector because there's a critical mass, there's an economical mass. Of course, they're going their way by their own. It's a business. It's not supported by public funding, but you know, people working for small companies, working for artists, you know, they work at one time in their life and their professional life, they work for the Cirque du Soleil at a certain point. They pass by there. They'll learn their you know, they're learned from them. So they get opportunity. Plus, Cirque du Soleil were created. Participate to create a lot of other companies, not just circus companies, but stage technicians and all that, all sorts of resources. They've been very, very contributive to all that. So saying that it won't have any effect would be, I would disagree. That's my point of view. Though the preceding discussion we had, from what we've been saying, I'm very much optimistic of the future of the Canadian circus and the circus in the community, specifically in Montreal. But I wouldn't say that will be without any impact if they would disappear.
Thank you.
Patrick. If I can add, I absolutely agree. Eric points out that the impact of Cirque du Soleil is so extensive, so diversified within the Montreal economy generally, but also specifically the performing arts milieu. They have multimedia companies. They have they co-own a company that basically rents out like projectors and lighting equipment, and they're everywhere. And in a sense, they've been an incredible resource. Sure, they're a commercial company and they've made money and they've kept money, but at the same time, they've generated so much and they've given so much through donations to TOHU historically, to the circus school, through membership fees at En Piste, not to Concordia, but that's another story. Just a wide range of initiatives. For instance, at one point they were putting 40 million a year for social circus internationally. This is absolutely incredible, and the impact of that disappearing potentially is astounding. That said, we've been talking as though Cirque du Soleil is dead and buried already, which is not the case. I don't know about you, but my phone has been buzzing for the past hour with all sorts of, news that's about to come out, journalists asking for opinions and stuff. So something's about to happen. It's not dead yet. There are multiple interested parties, one perhaps in a better position than others. Caisse de dépôt has just today written off their investment as bad debt, which is $170 million just disappeared. So that's that's our collective money. But it means that someone else is about to move in, and of course they're not going to dismantle it. Something you can't dismantle something that can generate up to $1 billion of revenue a year in the better years. U.S. An infrastructure which is absolutely incredible. So we're in a transition period. We're about to enter into this new period we're not sure about. The artists are gone, so this isn't artist-led anymore. It's more, business people it used to be from Texas, and it looks like there might be some Canadian businessmen who've been buying up some of the debt, on the side that might prove quite interested in Cirque du Soleil. But basically, there's absolutely no advantage for anyone, the business people, the administrator, or the circus media to see Cirque du Soleil disappear. What we're noticing, however, is that it's opened up great possibilities outside of a model where Cirque du Soleil used to dominate everything. And we're seeing more of a balancing of power and voice, perhaps.
Certainly, there will be some restructuring going on for them as well, even when they do come back online.
Yep.
Natalie, you might have an idea how many jobs. I mean, we've all heard this number of how many were laid off from Cirque du Soleil, but how many circus jobs in Quebec and Canada do you know of that have been lost in the past 6 months?
Well, we don't know for sure, but when we did our survey, that was back in April, we had an estimate by the 31st of July, and companies were estimating over 1,000 layoffs, permanent layoffs in their staff. However, I don't know with the wage subsidy that the government then gave. We know that I think it's 40%. Yeah, 40% of circus arts organizations took on the wage subsidy to try to retain their staff, and we had 19% that took the business account, which was essentially the interest-free loan. So we don't know for a fact how many jobs were lost in this sector, but we know a lot of people have been laid off at least at the beginning of the crisis. Yeah.
Wow. Did anyone else?
Well, we have the numbers for Cirque du Soleil. It's around 3,750 or so. And then you've got a number of colleagues laid off in all of the companies, which was actually probably a good thing in terms of the laying off. I mean, or the furloughing, because it allows them to basically access a federal program, CERB, if I remember well, which is about $2,000 a month from the federal government. So basically the social net within Canada is allowing for people to be jobless for a temporary period, and some of them are actually working on exploring things and finally having a bit of time for themselves
to figure it out.
Yeah.
I should have said that this number was all the organizations except Cirque du Soleil. That's an extra 3,500, I think. Yeah.
Well, we are almost out of time. I just wanted to ask one more question and let everybody reply to it if they like. Is there something hopeful, or is there a hallmark of Canadian circus that you'd like to mention, or a change that you are hopeful for? Anyone have anything?
Well, I think what we've seen, and that was is the word heartwarming, or anyway, that was reassuring, is the resilience of the sector. I think, which is possibly in part due to the social net that we had, of course, here to help them financially, individuals financially, and organizations as well, but just their resilience and their capacity to adapt. And we've seen a really great example of this from TOHU, what Ruth just said, all these different initiatives, and the way that the National Circuit School is adapting as well its program to make sure that all the students can go back to school. And so I think it's just incredible how people have come together and find solutions to continue to create, continue to teach, to continue to relaunch their activities, basically. So yeah.
I would like to just add to that, Ruth, and your engaging audiences, I hope that it continues to expand to be a little bit more online content for all these developing shows and things that are happening, because the rest of the circus world is not as well placed sometimes in continuing work, and it's very heartening to know that this is happening. It would be nice to see some of it, you know, and I know you probably have plans for that, but I just wanted to put that out there.
That's certainly, no, I mean, that's with the reduced mobility, the impossibility of travel right now, that's certainly a big part of what we're looking forward to for, you know, I know a number of companies that are like in creation right now and hoping to do some MIC programming that will
Awesome.
give it a little eyeful of what people are developing. Can I say my hope?
Sure.
You know, the fact that COVID pushes us outdoors, and the fact that circus has in it so much joy and just ability to connect with people, no matter who it is or where, you know, it makes it, this mixed with the program I just mentioned from the city, where they said just show up at a permit and put on a show. You know, these are this makes me hopeful about circus developing its capacity to just go out there and connect with people, and without a you know, the many blocks that have been put in as it's become more commercialized and more monetized. Just the fact that circus, you know, artists are coming to us and say, hey, you know, we want to put this little project together. We want to put it outdoors. We want people to show up. And that, you know, the fact that, you know, in Quebec, you have a willing government that's willing to support that kind of idea. And then in circus, you have an art form that's capable of doing that, you know. So that gives me a lot of hope about rekindling that connection between this art form and everybody else.
Yeah, it's like back to the roots of circus, right?
Yes,
clothes,
exactly. A family, a close family with a close culture and being supportive to each other. What is specific to circus is that your artists are practicing different disciplines, and they're not very much in competition. And through their training and learning process, they have to be supportive to ensure security to each other. So the feeling I have is through the pandemic, the organization that that support and that do circus have, you know, just expressed the same culture, have been led by the same culture, and they've been supportive to each other. They've been talking to each other. They've been looking for a solution together. So there have been a real sense of solidarity in the community, I feel. And if I have something, I hope, is that this will stay and continue through the pandemic and outside of the pandemic.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what all three colleagues said. You know, in the mid 80s, Quebec Circus sort of talked about reinventing circus. It was a bit arrogant and you know, naive but beautiful at the same time. The Cirque Reinventé, circus reinvented, and we've been basically handed an opportunity to reinvest circus through collective social resilience. And there's something beautiful about this. Yeah, sure, it threw us off, and we're on top of the world, you know, in terms of, you know, circus, and now we're not. So you really have to think about why do we do circus? How do we do circus? Who is it for? And you know, I'm hoping to see beautiful, extraordinary artistic voices emerge from this. People, you know, thrive. Individual artists thrive and find their place within this new configuration.
That's a beautiful dream. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for sharing that. I'd like to thank you all for being panelists. And before we go, I would just like to remind you that this panel was brought to you by Circus Talk, and our mission is to create a level playing field for the industry and to democratize access to information in the circus sector. If you haven't subscribed yet, Circus Talk invites you to do so today at circustalk.com. You can use the code COVID-19 yearly code to get a 60% discount on the yearly pro membership. We'd love to see you there. And there's also a free membership if you just want to stop by and sign up and get access to all these wonderful organizations and what they do. Thank you so much, everyone, for being part of our panel.
Subscribe.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
Merci.
Thank you, folks.